What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back on the video. It's Saturday. It's time to take a look at my favorite underdog picks this week. We were even yet again last week, though. The top 7 went 5-2. Nice to see, but we want to be doing better overall. I like the potential of this week's 21, and first time this season, there's actually 2 games that I really like. So we're going to go over 2 opportunities for some really good production this week. So that's 2 separate 20-to-1s, 2 games that I think could pop off. One of them is sort of obvious, the other one not so obvious. So we'll do that, but first we'll go over some individual picks as well. So sit back, hit the like button, and let's start things off with Rashid Shaheed, higher than 30.5 receiving yards. I'm sure a lot of people have seen the stats kind of circulating Twitter right now, or X right now, talking about the split between Shaheed and Michael Thomas specifically, because Olave, it doesn't really matter what the coverage is. He's just good regardless. But Shaheed versus Michael Thomas. Shaheed has been elite on like a yards per route run basis versus zone coverage. Michael Thomas, on the other hand, when teams are playing man coverage against the Saints, he gets targeted. I think it was like 43% first read target. Don't quote me on that. But basically, he gets targeted at a very high rate versus man, not so much versus zone. You can't really take advantage of that a ton this week. And usually when you have splits like that, you're looking at like, the top 5 and the bottom 5% of teams, or I guess top 5 teams, bottom 5 teams. So like who's running a ton or very little of something. The Bears play the 11th most zone coverage in the lead, so I guess it sort of leans there. But as I talked about in the start sit video, they've been leaning a little bit more towards man coverage recently, so I kind of view it overall as a wash. I don't think you can use that stat this week to help you out. The appeal for me is more just that the game environment itself and the matchup overall. Chicago ranks 1st in yards per carry allowed and 10th in rush defense CVA. They're a really strong defense on the ground, and teams know that, right? But they're 31st in pass defense CVO. So they are the ultimate pass funnel. Teams look at them and they're like, well, really good at stopping running backs, really, really bad if we throw it. Why don't we just throw it? And so teams are throwing against them at the 7th highest rate in the league, which is wild for a 2-6 team. Many teams will have a high pass play percentage against them, right? The opposite of rush play percentage, obviously. They'll have a high pass play percentage against them when they're really good because they're winning. And so teams find themselves down a score or 2 and they're like, well, we can't run the ball anyways. Even if we wanted to, we have to throw it. That's not the case against the Bears. The Bears lose most of their games and at minimum are trailing in a lot of games. And so teams usually would be like, okay, we're up, let's run it. They're still not choosing to run it. They're saying, okay, well, the easiest way for us to maintain this lead is to continue throwing the ball. And so you get elevated pass play rates against Chicago, and those teams are highly efficient when they pass it. Unfortunately, the Saints do run the ball more than expected. So if you lose like a per play basis, what the expectation is, Saints come in a little bit below that given whatever the game script is in that game. But in this spot, we should expect them to lean a little bit more pass heavy. In the 5 games where Derek Carr has attempted over 30 pass attempts, Shaheed has more than 30 receiving yards in 4 of those 5, with the one lower being 28. So he's usually hitting higher than this mark if we're seeing any sort of pass attempts from the Saints here. So far this season, only 2 quarterbacks have completed or attempted less than 30 passes against Chicago. It was Russell Wilson, who threw for 28, so just under that mark. But he only threw for that many because he was so efficient with those pass attempts. And then Jordan Love, who only threw for 27, because believe it or not, in week 1, the Packers were actually good and they scored 38 points. I know that feels like forever ago that the Packers were like decent on offense, but yeah, they scored 38. And so of course, we're not going to need a ton of pass attempts from Jordan Love in that spot. So basically, what's going to happen this week is either we're going to see Derek Carr throw the ball over 30 times, high pass attempts, and it's pretty likely Shaheed goes higher than his 30.5 line in that script, or Carr just is super efficient, and if he's super efficient, it's pretty likely you hit Shaheed for deep ball, which will also cause him to go higher. So either way, it's definitely a positive spot for Shaheed. I like higher in that spot. I would personally correlate it. I don't feel as strongly about this pick, so if you don't want to add it, don't. But I would correlate it with Carr's passing just because Shaheed is such an explosive player. if he gets loose downfield, if we see a game where, he's racking up these receptions, he's hitting for a big play, it's just more likely that Carr's also doing that. And if we're right about this spot, we're right that they're going to throw the ball more than expected, well, that's going to benefit Carr. So you're getting one thing right, but two of your picks are right. So I would correlate them, but up to you if you want to do that. Next up, we have Demario Douglas, higher than 41.5 receiving yards. This one comes down to, the three things we talk about basically are a mixture of talent, matchup, and opportunity, right? How good are you as a player? How good is the matchup? And how much opportunity are you going to get? Because even if you're really good, the matchup's good. If you only get 2 targets, there's only so much you can do with that, right? Well, Douglas, he was not a highly rated prospect, but at least in terms of the Patriots wide receiver core, the talent is there. He's clearly the best wide receiver now that we've got Kendrick Bourne done for the season, torn ACL, right? The matchup is fantastic. The opportunity on the offense, well, Kendrick Bourne is gone. Nobody else has stepped up. Juju's been trash. Rager he's never been good. It's not that he's been trash in New England. He's just never been good. Devonta Parker's been awful this season. Tyquan Thornton is a bust. And so you start moving around, Kayshon Boutte is apparently going to have a role this week. There's nothing on this wide receiver core. Douglas is by far their best receiver. The opportunity is going to be there because they're going to design looks. Even if he himself can't get open at a super high rate this week, which I think he'll be able to, go over in a second, even if that doesn't happen, they're going to specifically design him screen passes, specifically design him plays to just get the ball into his hands. So even if it's not working for him against the coverage, he's going to get looks, and I think it will work against the coverage. The Commanders have been ripped apart by wide receivers this season. They're allowing the highest yards per reception in the league. They run a ton of man coverage, which he should be able to beat, especially on short routes. I don't think he's going to open a ton deep downfield, but again, he has to hit 42. Right? If he's getting a few design looks, if he's getting the ball even short, close to the line of scrimmage, he should rack up, 5-6 receptions. And unless he's highly inefficient against the team that's allowing the highest yards per reception, that would be weird, right? I think it's a good pick. I think he's definitely going higher than this mark. I have him right now projected for about 57 receiving yards, but I don't want to say I'm being conservative because that's still a pretty high mark for someone who, it's Demario Douglas, right? It's not like a household name or anything. I'm giving him a 20% target share. I think that part is relatively conservative. I find it hard to believe he's going to come out there and have a 14% target share. Who is getting these targets on the Patriots? Maybe they spread it around, but I just went through the list of their wide receivers that are going to be available. It's not pretty. It is not good. They do not have a good wide receiver core. He's clearly their best. If he gets these design looks, he's going to be around 20%, and he could push a 25% target share in this game. There's no way he's not going higher if he gets to that mark. Final individual pick before we go over both of the 21s is Tyreek Hill, higher than 91.5 receiving yards. I know that's a lofty number. That's probably one of the higher hires, I guess we've said this season or really ever, picking higher on 91.5. Especially in a bad matchup. KC's a pretty negative matchup for pass catchers, but even factoring in the matchup, I do have his projection at around 108 receiving yards, so it's projected to go higher, even factoring all that matchup in, and I just think they're going to feed him this week. This is his first game playing Kansas City, and while narratives are mostly overblown, you can't tell me that he doesn't have extra motivation this week, especially being, an international game. All these guys are going to be playing really hard as the game's in Germany. It's just like a bigger stage, and so I'm thinking he's going to be highly involved. And a lot of times you can kind of throw out narratives when it's not the best player on a team, but even if the narrative wasn't there, of course they're going to design their game plan around Tyreek Hill. Of course they're going to try and get him the ball a ton because that's how their offense works. That's how they're trying to win. So throw narrative out, he still projects really well. I can't project a narrative, right? That's just a gut thing we have to kind of go with. But just think about the best way that they can win is to utilize Tyreek Hill. And if we can also say maybe there's extra incentive for them to have him have a good game against Kansas City. Maybe he wants to have a great game against them. It just makes sense that if the projection says it's a good pick, narrative kind of just pushes it over the top for me. Okay. Which 2 games do we like this week? First one, a bit of an obvious one, but that's Bills at Bengals. Probably the game I'm most excited for. I definitely want to watch this Dolphins, quote unquote, at Chiefs again in Germany. That game's going to be exciting, but I think the Sunday night game, I think that's going to be a really, really fun game to watch now that Burrow's finally healthy. That offense was clearly clicking last week. He'll obviously be good to go this week. I just think it's going to be awesome to watch. And it's when we're taking these, right, we want to see these back and forth games. But what's extra appealing is when we can get explosiveness, right? Because even if these teams are highly efficient in offense and they keep moving down the field, we don't want like 12, 13 play drives. We don't want it to be like, oh, well, they haven't punted yet, but they keep having like 7 minutes off the clock on every one of their drives. And now the opportunities aren't really there, even if they're efficient. But if someone hits for a deep play and you have a 3-play touchdown drive, the other team's back on the field. The other team's probably playing more aggressive. Maybe if they are aggressive, they can hit on a big play. And we really see these plays, not even plays rack up, the yardage rack up in a quick amount of time off the clock, which can cause plays to rack up because if each team keeps having to play aggressive, that's how the plays really get there. So I definitely like attacking both these sides. Again, you want to be getting explosive players. That's why we don't really include like Tyler Boyd, let's say. Like sometimes we have included him, but I typically don't because he's a player that when he gets there, it's off of like, 10-yard chunk plays. It's not like Gabe Davis, who we're going to include here, who could hit on a 60-yard touchdown. I want Gabe going off. I don't want Tyler Boyd going off because Gabe's going to correlate much better with the other side. So here's what I'm seeing in this one. We're going to take Burrow, higher than 261.5 passing yards. Jamar Chase, higher than 85.5 receiving yards. T. Higgins, higher than 48.5 receiving yards. Both Chase and Higgins can be used deep downfield. Both of them obviously great wide receivers. And if both of them are hitting higher than their mark, it's pretty likely that Burrow is passing for more than his projection, and so you'd want to have all three of them together. And then we've got the Bills side. I'm taking Gabe Davis, who I said over 41.5 feels very low. He's coming off, 12 or 13 targets? I think it was 12 targets last week when they utilized more 3 wide receiver sets because obviously Dawson Knox injured right now, and so he's going to have, a better target share. He's going to get, some more looks closer. Of course, we still want those deeper looks, but the fact that he still gets the deep looks and he's just adding on also intermediate looks, it just elevates the chance that he has a busted play. He gets deep downfield, but even if he doesn't, 41.5, he only needs really 3 receptions given his level of efficiency. And then I'm putting on Josh Allen over 26.5 rushing yards. That correlation doesn't really fit with Gabe Davis, but it does on the Burrow side. If Higgins and Chase are really hitting and we get a negative game script for the Bills in this spot, or not even negative in the terms of down 14, just trailing at some point and them knowing they can't just run the ball every play, well, that helps Gabe and also helps the rushing for Josh Allen. And I just think, they've been very conservative with Josh Allen's rushing this season. They opened camp being like, this is what we're going to do. We don't want him taking as many hits. And so we have seen his numbers crater. He was at 45 and 47 rushing yards per game the last 2 seasons. He's sitting at 23 per game right now. So he's running the ball way, way less. We saw last week he started running it a little bit more. And you could even hear the commentators during the game being like, this is part of his game. This is what really elevates this offense. And you could tell when he was taking off and scrambling, their drives were definitely getting sustained. They looked a lot better. I think in this spot, given how big of a game this is, I don't see how they kind of bottle him up and say, no, Josh, you're not going to take these scrambles. I think this week, that all goes out the window. They're not going to limit that. They want to win this game. It's a huge game for them. So if before he was averaging, 45 to 47, taking higher on 26.5, if we think he kind of goes back to what he was doing in previous seasons, that's a pretty good bet to make, especially since it does, in a way, correlate to the other side. If the other side's hitting, it makes it more likely that he is. So that's the one I like. First off, again, that was a kind of obvious game. I think a lot of people are going to want that one. The other one, a not so obvious game, one that's going to sound gross when I say it, is Colts at Panthers. The Colts have allowed the most plays per game against them this season. And while the Panthers have been pretty mediocre on offense, honestly poor on offense overall, for most of the season. They had a little bit of life last week. They didn't score that much, but you could tell they had a little bit of life in them. That was the first week that Thomas Brown took over play calling. And they did have, if you look at the underlying metrics, their highest pass rate over expectation of the season. And they did play at the 8th fastest situation neutral pace. Again, we didn't see it all play out because the Texans are kind of a slow team. And so that kind of slowed the game down there. But in this spot, playing the Colts make everyone play faster. They allow everyone to run a lot more plays. It doesn't matter who they're playing. And so, we're coming off what I would say was Bryce Young's best game of the season against what was a much more difficult opponent. The Texans are a better defense than the Colts. I mean, again, the Colts turn every single game into a high-scoring affair. They are pace up. They allow plays, or they generate plays on their side, but they allow plays against them as well. We're just going to see efficiency in this game, I think, to a higher degree than a lot of people are thinking, given that the quarterbacks are Gardner Minshew and the rookie and Bryce Young, who, again, looked a lot better last week, but has had games where he has not looked good this season. On the Colts side, they also like to run the ball a lot, and they're taking on a Panthers defense that's allowed the highest rush play percentage against them. So basically, what I'm kind of getting at is everything sets up here for both sides to kind of be able to do whatever they want on offense. And whenever you're allowing that to happen, you're opening the door to efficiency. Like if you're forcing a team to be like, oh, everyone runs against this team, but we're not a very good running offense. If you kind of take that trap, like the Texans took the trap last week, they were like, oh, okay, everyone else does this. They find success. Can we do it? It's like, no, you guys stink at running the ball. You should continue throwing it. They took the trap. They switched to a run-based attack, and it didn't work out. Well, the Colts want to run the ball. And so when you have teams like that, it's almost like a puzzle piece. It kind of just fits in easily there to be like, well, this is what we want to do. And teams are good against that against you. We're probably going to find success. Leads to scoring, helps the other side, especially if the other side's more pass heavy now. It's a really good spot for passing. Everything just correlates together beautifully. So the 5 that I would take in this game are Bryce Young, higher than 226.5 passing yards. Adam Thielen, higher than 68.5 receiving yards. Chuba Hubbard, it's going to theoretically be a negative correlation here, higher than 45.5 rushing yards, but we've gotten word that he's going to be a starter. I mean, we knew all week he was going to be the starter. He's basically overtaken Miles Sanders. They just have a lean towards him. Maybe it is somewhat injury related right now with Miles Sanders, but it doesn't matter. Chuba Hubbard's going to be the starter now. He's going to be getting more of these carries. It's a good spot on the ground and through the air for Panthers side against the Colts. And so he'll have some level of efficiency there. And if he's getting starters carries, he should push higher than 45.5. Then we've got Jonathan Taylor on the other side, higher than 63.5 rushing yards. If you wanted to include Zach Moss, I think it would be fine. Off the top of my head, I don't know what the line was, but if I remember correctly, it was around 40 to 43 in that general spot. If you want to take both of them and just say the Colts run the ball a ton, they find success, they're scoring points that way, both these two go over, that causes the Panthers side to have to be more aggressive. They're hitting their hires. I think that makes sense. I'm not going to include it because something in me just can't take both running backs. And I do think the comments basically this week were that it wasn't an injury for JT. It was more that Moss ripped up that long run and they wanted to go with the hot hand, but then they still did end up the game giving Jonathan Taylor more touches. He had a lot more snaps. And so I think they're still leaning Jonathan Taylor. I think he's going to go higher in this spot. And again, I just don't feel comfortable taking both running backs, but if you wanted to, I think that's fine. The one I would add on, I know it feels weird doing 4 on one side. I would add on whatever Jonathan Mingo's line is. Now, we can reevaluate if it's different than I think. I have him projected for around 47 receiving yards right now. I'm thinking the line is going to be somewhere around 35. They haven't posted yet because Laviska's still questionable. I don't think Laviska's going to play this week. He's been out recently. I don't think he's going to play. Chark is questionable, but I think he's going to play. So I think once, Underdog, DK, all these sites gain more confidence in who exactly is playing this week, they'll post a line on Saturday. But again, I think Chark's going to play. And so my guess is for Mingo, it's around 35. That would be my guess for his receiving yards. If it's in that general range, I want higher on that, just given how much more I think they're going to pass the ball this week. If it's closer to like 40, 45, maybe we won't do that. And I'll update the website. I can post, I'll pin a comment to this video if I look and the line's like 45. If the line's 45, we're not taking that, and I'll tell you one you can add on instead to make it the 20-1. But again, my guess is that it's, around 35, in which case I want that one. So those are my favorite underdog picks this week. If you want to get a free square this week on Underdog, make things a little bit easier for yourself, I believe the free square this week is higher or lower 0.5 total yards for Lamar Jackson. Pretty likely to go higher there. So if you want to be able to use that one, plus have your first deposit doubled up to $500 and see all of my favorite picks for free, see my running back report every week, my wide receiver report every week, all for free for the rest of the season, all you have to do is sign up for your first Underdog account today using promo code FFA, make a minimum $10 deposit. That's it. Pretty sweet deal. Definitely take advantage of, all the free content that it comes with and the free square, right? Higher or lower than half a yard from Lamar Jackson. Believe that's the one this week. Pretty obvious he's going to go higher than that mark. So make sure to leave a like if you watched this far. Subscribe to the channel if you are new here. Thanks for watching.